There you go, demon brackets. This is what we're going to be talking about today. What we're going to talk about is why you shouldn't use these things for your truck, at least not for off-road. They have their applications, but it's pretty much only for looks on the street. The topic of demon brackets occasionally pops up on my local Facebook page for Tacomas. One of the guys on there was asking, I want to mount shackles to the front of my truck. I want a front recovery point. And everyone on that post was pretty much just laughing at the guy, just saying, haha, no, don't use demon brackets. Please don't laugh at people. I finally had to chime in and just say, hey man, sorry, everyone was laughing at you, but here's why you shouldn't use demon brackets for off-road recoveries. And that's what we're gonna talk about today. Bringing you in here really close to these demon brackets, the biggest issue with these guys, the one that you can initially see just at looking at, is these are all individual pieces of steel. It's 4 pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces stacked together to get the proper thickness to slide a shackle through this guy. And then how they're fused together is pretty poor too. So there's a little weld here that only doesn't go all the way in and is barely grabbing these 2 center sections. There's a baby little tack weld right there. And then there's another little dodgy weld at the bottom. So these 2 center ones are barely held on there. I'm gonna smash this sucker with a hammer in a little bit, and we'll see how it fares, versus something that's solid steel that should be used for a shackle. Now, one of the big issues with these demon brackets is sometimes when you're doing recoveries, you can't always be pulling straight. Sometimes you got to pull off at an angle. Now, say the frame of your truck is right here. You got a shackle tied into your demon bracket here. And if you're going to be doing recovery and they're side loading, these layered pieces of steel that are very, very poorly welded together just does not deal with side loading as good as a solid chunk of steel will. And the reason is, first off, those welds might break. Secondly, these pieces of steel can all slide on each other where they're not fixed to each other. So they effectively are only treated as a very thin piece of steel, like a 1/4 inch, whatever this is. Whereas imagine trying to bend something that's that thick, which this is a hitch receiver part, but normally you would see something this thick welded to an actual off-road bumper. So another issue with these guys, it's just easier to show you this on the workbench. This is part of the truck that gets removed, but what the demon bracket would normally bolt to. So this guy would go into the frame of the truck. And I've got this bolt loose just to kind of exaggerate what's going on here. But here's the issue. So you're pulling here, and because of that bolt is actually offset from the line of your pulling, you induce a torque right here. So you're gonna pull on here, and you notice how it rocks over. So we'll straighten it out again, pull on it. It just inherently rocks over that little bit. And again, you want to pull straight on this guy, because these things should be pretty good in tension, but as you pull off at an angle, these things are going to be weak just because they're, thin pieces of steel that aren't joined together, at least not well. They're just terrible welds. Anyways, there's an inherent issue because that bolt is offset. Another issue with that multi-layered piece of steel is what happens when you smash this guy on a rock. Whether you got a shackle in here or not, it'll actually probably fare better with a shackle in it. Imagine smashing this guy on a rock, and the only thing that keeping these center sections in place is those little tiny tack welds, and that thing essentially pushing back. If you got a shackle in here, this might bend and then it might bind your shackle so you won't be able to get this out. If you don't have a shackle in here, it'll probably just break and move back, and then you won't be able to get a shackle in there when it comes time to do a recovery. So I have a very different setup on my truck, but look how low that demon bracket is. It's the lowest part on your frame. Got the demon bracket chucked in the vise here. As promised, we're gonna do some testing on it. So I think we're gonna start hitting it in the front, simulating a rock, just kind of your truck plying under a rock and hitting a demon bracket. And then I'll take the other bracket and do a side load test on it. We'll start with a basic hammer. Pretty much no damage. Mini sledge, 48 ounce. Big boy sledge. That's 8 pound. All right, so as we thought, just broke those 2 back welds, and you can see the coating's pretty terrible in between these layers of material. That's probably something's gonna rust in the future. But anyways, yep, shoot it right off. If you had a shackle in there, I bet you it'd be stuck, because now I can't move that by hand. That was, an 8 pound sledge, and it was a pretty good sling, but you figure you've got a 4,000 pound truck driving this thing into a rock. Now, I have heard people make the argument for demon brackets because the factory recovery hook actually bolts into the same place as a demon bracket, or it's at least very similar. The demon bracket actually mounts just to the side, and your factory hook would be over here. The difference is that demon brackets only use one bolt hole on the very bottom of it, versus your factory hook, as you can see right there, uses 2 bolts. So that, now if you're gonna use your demon brackets, yeah, you've got 1 bolt here, and then you have a second demon bracket on that side that I don't have installed, but you'd have to rig to 2 demon brackets, or 2 points. And you'd have to open 2 shackles and close them back up. Versus if you just use a factory hook, you can literally just throw a snatch strap right over the end of that guy, and it's got this little thing right on top of there, so straps do not fall off of it. I have personally used this thing for like some decent recovery loads, doing a snatch on them, and that factory hook is totally fine. If you want to get started on off-roading, just make sure you have this factory hook on your truck, and this is totally fine for light recovery loads. We're going to get back to demon brackets in a second here, but I want to go over all of the connection points that go into something that's actually rated for a recovery. So there's a front hitch on this setup. I use this for winching, and you could theoretically do a snatch off of it as well. This is a custom part right here, but a lot of the pickup points, all the points that it ties into the truck's frame, are very similar to bumpers on the market. So first off, there's one down here on this cantilevered part of the frame where your demon bracket would mount. There's one here. There's 3 bolts up here, all tying into this bracket. This body mount right here has a bracket back here on it, and then it's got this big piece that goes and wraps around. Sometimes other companies will make it where this goes to your sway bar bracket, but I've just got it to a factory hole back here in the frame. Like, there's all of these connection points just you know, on one side of the vehicle, and then those are all redundant on the other side of the vehicle, versus a demon bracket, which just relies on 1 bolt. And I do want to note here, this demon bracket is not properly installed. Normally there's a little frame extension right here, and it would go through this little bolt hole here. I know somebody's going to call me out on that. I just have it zip tied to the frame right now in a very similar location, just to kind of show you what's going on with this thing. It's not compatible with my setup, and I didn't feel like pulling all this off just to make this video. Back to the demon bracket. I'm going to pull off my little support bracket here so I can show you another bad thing about demon brackets. So here's your main frame rail that all your independent suspension ties into, and then there's this little cantilevered part of the frame. That is where your demon bracket is pulling off of. And a really good way to think about that, or why this is bad, is that little cantilevered part acts like a ratchet. It just adds leverage to the frame, so it's constantly trying to twist up on this part of the frame as you do a pull right here. And that wouldn't be a terrible thing, but if you actually look right here, there's these little dimples on your frame. So this is actually a factory crush zone. So when you're in a front collision, this will go here and it will crunch, and this is designed, you know, to save you. It's gonna ruin the frame of your truck, but you know, as long as you make it out okay, that's what Toyota cares about. Anyways, there's a lot of leverage here, all this distance, which may not look very far, but when you're putting a couple thousand pounds, 10,000 pounds, whatever, of force on that, you could bend this thing. I've never personally heard of anybody doing this, but there are companies out there that actually sell like a plate that will go right here that you can weld in place to reinforce this section. I'm sure at some point somebody doing recovery off this thing, hopefully not on demon brackets, has bent this part of the frame at some point. So there's just one more thing that I don't like about demon brackets, and that is this right here. Actually, back up. You shouldn't even be using demon brackets for recovery, but if you were using these for recovery, it'd probably be okay for winching, assuming you're rigged to both demon brackets, so you're pulling off of 2 bolt holes. Here's what the bolt hole looks like. So you're pulling off of 2 bolt holes, you would probably be okay for winching, because it's, you know, only a couple thousand pounds, assuming you got like a 5,000 something pound vehicle stuck. You know, overrate that by 50%, so it's a 75,000 pound pull. Most, you know, these are about they're probably just under a 1/2 inch bolt. Most bolts that are rated that are like 15 to 20,000 pounds. I don't know, I'll Google search it and see what a bolt's rated to. But anyways, you'd be fine for winching. Not for a snatch recovery. A snatch recovery adds a lot of additional force, even though you may only be pulling out a vehicle that's, you know, rated 7,000 pounds, so 5,000 vehicle plus 50% would be about 7,000 pounds. When you're doing a snatch recovery, the forces are just inherently a lot higher because everything's moving. With the winching, everything's slow, so it's just the weight of the stuck vehicle, essentially. Anyways, getting back to the other thing that I do not like about demon brackets is this right here. You are going to a soft shackle. I don't know why so many people still use hard shackles. This probably deserves its own video, but we're gonna make this really quick. And the reason why I don't like hard shackles is because of these guys. Have become pretty normal in the off-road industry. This is a soft shackle. I'm sure you've heard of one. If not, here you go. That's what it is. The reason why these are better, this is substantially lighter and it goes together really quick. You saw how quick that was. You could probably take this apart and you could probably open this and then close this quicker than you can even close a hard shackle. These things are crazy light. Look at the size of the opening on that versus that tiny little opening. You can get way more stuff in here, way easier. There used to be kind of a price of entry between these two, but this is a very cheap soft shackle here. It's not as supple in that region there, but that's okay. This is a cheap one, and I have personally taken this soft shackle up to like a 12,000 pound load, and it was fine under winching. So that's the big thing I do not like about Demon brackets is you have to use a steel shackle with that because it has these sharp edges on here that will cut a soft shackle. So here's a higher quality soft shackle. You can see how supple that is. This is also a super long length one, so you can go around some crazy stuff with that opening. But anyways, open it up super quick. One of the awesome things about soft shackles, boom, right around the tube bumper there, you've got an awesome connection point. These are just better, guys. Here's what I use for recovery. This is a Factor 55 fancy aluminum thing. You saw this earlier in the video. It's got a little chamfered edge, so you can use your soft shackles inside of this guy. You can also use a hard shackle if that's all you had. But I just use this in the rear or the front of the vehicle and use it in conjunction with a soft shackle. And actually in my recovery gear here, I only carry one hard shackle and that's it. And that hard shackle is specifically to go to somebody else's vehicle because again, I don't need hard shackles to recover my vehicle. Also, I've seen it happen many times with this shackle, you know, dangling down here, this pin will eventually work its way loose as you're driving. Can you imagine that coming off of somebody else's vehicle and smacking the front end of yours? You'd be... So that's the video on why you shouldn't use Demon brackets for your Tacoma. Going over all the cons for this real quick. It's multiple pieces of steel. It's inherently weak. It's terrible at side loading. It only uses, I'm looking at my list here. It only uses one bolt. It mounts to a cantilevered part of your frame, which is also your crash structure. Yeah, and you could smash this on a rock and then you won't even be able to get a shackle into your crappy front recovery point. Look, just save your money. Don't buy these things. They are only for looks. If that's all you, if you've got a Tacoma and you just drive it on the street, these are fine. Mount your shackle to it. Please put some Loctite on the shackle so it doesn't fall off and hit my truck. If you're gonna go off-road, just save your money. Buy an actual off-road bumper or winch mount or whatever that has shackle mounts or recovery points already in it. You can buy a hidden front hitch. The only recovery point that I'm aware of for Tacomas that I know for certain is good is ARB. They make a pretty awesome recovery point. Piece of crap. Also, channel update. So next big thing we're going to do this truck. So you probably saw the custom flatbed on here. It's obviously got a custom front end, remote mount winch. Let me know if you want to see a video on why we do a remote mount winch versus a hard mount winch that would always be up here. Anyways, next big update. I'm actually cutting this part of the frame where your Demon bracket would go completely off of my truck. So we're going to cut it right here. This is just a little tiny piece that comes down from your main frame rail. And essentially what I'm going to do, so your factory skid plate stops right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this part off and the factory skid plate will start right down here and come up at a super steep angle and it's going to come to the bottom of this tube. It should be pretty cool. It's going to have a really good approach angle. Obviously we've got a ton of tire exposed. This truck's got an insane approach angle, but with that lower part of the frame chopped off there, it's going to be even higher up, man. It's going to be insane. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure and subscribe. Also, people have called me out on the comments before, but this time I think I'm serious. The whole reason this truck has this crazy custom flatbed on it is for a camper. And I'm pretty sure, don't get on to me too much. Life stuff gets in the way. You guys know what I'm talking about. Life stuff gets in the way. But anyways, the reason why this truck has a custom flatbed on it is for a camper. Hopefully once I get done with modifying the front of the truck, I'm going to rebuild a set of rock sliders for this thing. And then hopefully we'll get to the camper build.